Good afternoon. 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Sean Davis from The Federalist joins us here at the top of the hour at 5 o'clock as the Democrats ditch Joe Biden and the Secret Service director refuses to give any good answers on how her agency almost let Donald Trump be killed in Butler, Pennsylvania. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Here she is, Kim Cheatle, testifying today before Congress and saying, sorry, it's an ongoing investigation.
At any point Saturday, did the Secret Service have an agent on top of that roof?
Sir, I'm sure, as you can imagine, that we are just 9 days out from this incident, and there's still an ongoing investigation. And so I want to make sure that any information that we are providing to you is factual.
You can't, okay. Why did the Secret Service not, can you answer why the Secret Service didn't place a single agent on the roof?
We are still looking into the advanced process and the decisions that were made.
Okay.
You can hear the groans of the other members of Congress on that dais as Kim Cheatle refused to answer questions in any constructive way today. For more on this, I want to bring in a woman who was in the room and whose reporting is must follow on this subject and so much more. Susan Crabtree from RealClearPolitics is here. Susan, great to have you back with us.
Oh, it's great to be with you again, Vince.
And I want to point out that, the Secret Service has denied your reporting over the course of the last week, and it has now reversed itself and admitted you were telling the truth all along.
Yes, it's interesting that it took the Washington Post 6 days to confirm what we knew on Saturday and Monday, that there were many attempts and requests by the Secret Service detail assigned to President Trump for more security, additional security measures, and those were denied over the course of 2 years. We did report that, and quite vocally, and we were told that that was, just out of the question. That didn't happen, and I have detailed information about this. It's interesting to see that happen, but that is deja vu all over again for me. The same thing happened in 2014, and actually it caused the first female Secret Service chief to resign, and she lied to me and to other reporters about an incident that Obama was found, and to have been in an elevator in Atlanta with a person who was armed that wasn't cleared to have the gun. There was such a clear someone with the gun. So Julia Pearson lied about that. Her spokesman came out and tried to tell me it wasn't true, but he was just not in the loop. And also the actual president was not in the loop. Julia Pearson didn't tell him it was true, and didn't tell the DHS Secretary Jay Johnson at the time it was true.
Right.
And guess what? A week later, she's fired. So, we'll see what happens in this case.
Yes.
It's been 9 days, and she still can't talk about anything about it's an still ongoing investigation. My takeaway headline is her comment, her bureaucratese, just such a unbelievable statement that I brought a timeline with no specifics.
I mean, how could she even come before Congress and say that? And if that is the position that you were going to take, why wouldn't she tell the committee ahead of time, I can sit there, but I'm not going to be able to answer any questions? She didn't do that. Instead, she sprung it on everybody today that she was going to refuse to give any meaningful information.
That's right. And she also would not, she would sort of, I'm sorry, I'm still in the Rayburn, so if you hear noise coming, I've just been staying here talking to members and staffers afterwards. But she said, she kind of in a way confirmed herself about that she had denied the request for extra Secret Service protection for President Trump over the course of many months.
Yes.
And she sort of sidestepped that question, though she didn't disagree with it when members of Congress asked her about it. She said, well, it didn't cause any vulnerabilities. Well, according to whom? You mean somebody else didn't come and shoot him? You got lucky? I don't know what you're talking about.
Her answers today were Fauci-esque, the way that she responded to that question. Listen, this is an exchange between Jim Jordan and Kim Cheatle on this very subject. Again, our guest, Susan Crabtree, had reported that the Trump campaign had requested all sorts of additional protection that they were denied. Here is the exchange between Jim Jordan and Kim Cheatle.
But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this: Mr. Coglianese acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Coglianese your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology.
Okay, so in a roundabout way, she is confirming that these were denials. She's just saying it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and according to whom, I was told from my sources afterwards, and I'll break it with you first, is that they were not provided. My Secret Service sources in the community are telling me that it was a big lie to say that there was not vulnerabilities presented by those denials. That in fact there was an advanced magnometer team that Trump used to have when he was president, and it was not present during that rally, and that they had taken these magnometer teams. They go in and advance to the event, and they sort of look where the magnometer should be put, and the estimated number that's needed. And I was told it was an outrage that they took those away for somebody as high profile and such a controversial national political figure with 50,000 people at his rallies to not have those advance teams going in.
Susan Crabtree, I just want to verify I heard what you said correctly. Kim Cheatle said today, the head of the Secret Service, that the July 13th Butler, Pennsylvania rally didn't have any requests denied. Are you saying that actually there was a request denied for an advanced magnetometer?
No, those were in the past. He had those, and they were taken away from him when he's the president. I'm not saying that they were requested because they were already denied many, many months ago when he became a candidate.
Got it.
So I'm just telling you, the difference between when he was the president. They're saying there's no vulnerabilities that occurred. My sources are telling me that is a lie because you're not sending in the advanced magnometers to even figure out where they should go.
Right.
And so that obviously, all of these things create more security possibility for security lapses. It's not the most heightened security that you can provide, and why aren't they providing him the most heightened security they could provide when he is attracting 50,000 people to his rallies and he's the top? I would assume he was the top threat.
Yeah,
he has the most threats of any candidate. And the other thing that that goes to is when she talks about we use the assets to cover our bases basically when we don't use the top amount of security we can. Well, one of those things that they did was for local law enforcement. They relied heavily on local law enforcement, and we see the problems that occurred with that. From what I understand, what Senator Johnson put out in a very detailed initial report yesterday that contains all kinds of chilling and very good detail. And one of his problems was that local law enforcement weren't communicating with the Secret Service after they noticed the guy. I don't know if they were talking to their own people, but they're not on the same radio frequency, which was news to me when I talked to my Secret Service sources. Oh, they use a different frequency. So they were saying, hey, we spot this guy. So that was going back to their command. But there's a joint command center between the two. And for some reason, it wasn't getting to that joint center. So that there was a disconnect in communication, it appears to be, between the local law enforcement that they were relying on heavily and the Secret Service snipers in a position to fire.
So the local law enforcement radio calls. You know, with those officers, they fall off. One of them falls off the roof. The other one who was boosting him, according to the town manager, I believe his name is Tom Knights, they both pick up the radio and they start calling this in immediately. There's a shooter on the roof. What you're telling me is that communication didn't make its way to the relevant command center?
That is what Senator Johnson's evidence is asking. I mean, he has evidence. Go back and look. I tweeted how I think I was the first to be given that preliminary report from his office, and it's extremely detailed. And that's what the report says, that there is a disconnect between. And I've since learned that they're not on the same radio frequency. It's impossible to get them on the same radio frequency. So if you are overly relying on local law enforcement, which is as obvious as this case that they did, I'm told that there were very few permanent detailees from the president's regular team at the event. In fact, it was only, maybe one, I'm told, one permanent detailee. The arrests were attempts, and then you're relying on local law enforcement to she kept using the word overwash.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I think it's like an insider Secret Service term for, we're going to rely on local law enforcement, bring up the rear. And then who determined that building was not inside the official perimeter?
She kept using that phrase, overwatch, today to refer to kind of observation of the area around President Trump, I guess to include that rooftop where the shooter was shooting from. One of the members of Congress asked, well, was that a drone? Was that a drone when you're referring to Overwatch? And she refused to answer the question. She said she just didn't give an answer to it.
Well, they didn't have drones, but the shooter did. And that's another serious point of controversy because they have used drones in the past, and they have the capability of using drones, and it's a controversy that's dated back to 2016, from what I understand. Are they going to institute drones or not? But she couldn't even say when the shooter put the drone up that morning, even though we have confirmed reports that indeed happened. So the joke in the Secret Service is that crooks did better advanced work than the Secret Service.
Unquestionably. It's awful that that's the case. Hey, I saw a report from you today, Susan Crabtree. You say that internal Secret Service documents reveal that there were only 3 post-standers allotted to Trump's rally on July 13th versus 12 that were at Jill Biden's event in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What is a post-stander, and what does this report tell us?
A post-stander it's Secret Service. They're not relying on local law enforcement, so it's actual extra Secret Service agents that are assigned to specific target areas that have vulnerabilities. So it's basically there's the team that is assigned to Trump, the special agents, there's the counter sniper team, and then these post-standers. And Grassley has gotten an from the whistleblowers, internal email communication showing the disparity between those two events. And that was something that I reported on Sunday night of the last week, and that's what the Secret Service came out and direct tweeted at me that it was wrong, that there were sources diverted from Trump's event to Joe Biden's event. Well, the term, it might be an issue of semantics because diverted may have been too strong a term, even though that's a term that my sources were using. It may have just been a misallocation, but certainly we see it here. And Grassley has asked her, he's a huge fan of whistleblowers, he's a protector of whistleblowers, he has asked her for the breakdown of all the resources at the Trump rally versus all the resources devoted to the Joe Biden event, and she is stonewalling him. He's asked her twice now for that information, and it took a member of Congress, during this committee hearing, 2 hours and 18 minutes to ask about that.
So that Jill Biden event in Pittsburgh, according to this whistleblower speaking to Chuck Grassley and your reporting, was much more protected than Trump's event, and yet it was indoors, wasn't it? Jill was indoors. Trump was outdoors in a very vulnerable position.
Well, we don't know if it was more protected. We just know there's a sign. There's some smoke here with the post standards, because that's the only information we have so far. But he wants a breakdown of the resources devoted. I mean, here's where my litmus test is. I mean, it's an obvious litmus test. The Trump rally, I'm learning now, had 2 sets of counter sniper teams, 2 each, so 4 counter snipers assigned and 1 local law enforcement counter sniper team. So maybe a total of 6. How many did Joe Biden's event have? If they had a counter sniper team at an inside event, then that seems odd, or maybe if they'd had 2. But we just need a general breakdown of what the resources were between the 2 events, because they were happening at the same time. And we know that the Secret Service to say it was stretched thin was an understatement on that week, because there was a NATO summit that they had to cover, and there's also the RNC convention, which is beginning, which there was law enforcement everywhere you looked at that convention, which was good because, there was there was someone who arrested with another, semi-automatic rifle and lots of rounds in a screen mask. It was a little disconcerting, but certainly they were stretched thin. So it's just, we need that information.
Yes.
They're not providing it. Why are they not providing it? And why did it take 2 hours and 18 minutes for any member of Congress today to ask about that specific issue? I don't feel like the members of Congress, Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Timmons, those are standouts, but I didn't feel like the members of Congress, and Mike Waltz at the end, I didn't think they were very prepared. They needed to go look at what Ron Johnson put out yesterday and what Senator Grassley put out yesterday, extremely detailed findings.
Yes.
And they didn't seem to really, and Jamie Raskin it was interesting to me that he did decide to go with James Comer, the chairman. They offered a bipartisan letter calling on her to resign. So that was interesting to me that he did join forces. He wouldn't say how many Democrats supported it, but he said you saw today that quite a few did on their side. But he didn't. He said we didn't ask them to sign it. We didn't circulate it among. I thought that's convenient, but anyway, that was significant at the end of the hearing that was announced.
Yeah, the members of Congress who don't seem to know what they're talking about are infuriating to watch. I agree with you about that. Susan Crabtree, thank you very much for your excellent reporting. Look forward to having you back again soon as you keep digging in. Thank you.
Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Chairman, I want to.
Come on.
We have to maintain decorum in this committee, no matter how
have you provided
upset we
any
get.
and all memos?
Congresswoman Nancy Mace laying into Kim Cheatle, the head of the Secret Service, who at this hour is still refusing to resign, both Democrats and Republicans calling for it. She's trying to pull a Biden. Just stick it out. Coming up, your calls, more audio from that hearing. What are we learning? That's ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Sean Davis will be with us from The Federalist at 5 o'clock. We talk about Joe Biden jumping out of this presidential race after a Democrat-run coup, and Kim Cheatle refusing to answer questions about how Donald Trump was almost assassinated last week. Sorry, we're still conducting an investigation. 60 days, she says. Even AOC was like, what? 60 days? That's lunacy. Even AOC thinks that. Yeah, that's crazy. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A ton of calls coming in. Let's go to line 6. Phil in Fredericksburg. Phil, good afternoon, sir.
Hey, Vince, look, this Cheatle lady, she's got to go today. She's got to go right now. She's endangering all the protectees, the Bushes, the Obamas, the Clintons. She's endangering all those people. She's endangering the president. She's got to go. They got to have a long-term, decades experience Secret Service professional running that agency. But also, Joe Biden has to go. He can't run for president. He can't run the government. And Kamala Harris needs to become president. And the reason is because once she does that, there's no reason for Hillary Clinton to make an accident for Kamala Harris to have.
Well, if she did, she wouldn't be that well protected. That's the word on the street right now, Phil, based on everything we're seeing coming out of the Secret Service. And your point about both of them resigning, excellent. Biden is a guy who isn't competent enough to stand trial. He's not competent enough to run for re-election. He's not competent enough to raise German shepherds to stop them from biting people in the White House. In other words, he's not competent enough to be president. So he should resign today. Is Kamala Harris an awful person and who doesn't deserve to be president of the United States? Of course. But in light of everything we know about Joe, he should resign. He should resign that post. And yet here we are still playing this stupid game. Thank you, Phil, for the call. On this issue, on Kim Cheatle, the Secret Service director, imperiling the protectees, the people that the Secret Service are supposed to be protecting. Do you know that not a single person associated with the Trump rally on July 13th has been placed on administrative leave or disciplined in any way at all? Like, not even pending the results of an investigation. No, Kim Cheatle revealed today nobody's been disciplined. In other words, the same idiots who are responsible for the awful security situation for Trump are still working and still in good standing at the Secret Service.
Have any employees been disciplined for their role in Butler, PA incident?
No, sir, not at this time. I am asking those questions.
So no employee has been disciplined and no employee has been placed in any position that would place their job in jeopardy nor their standing in the agency.
We are still in the process of
That's not what
people.
I asked. You're the person that runs the place. You're the person that knows right from wrong, good from bad. You've had a number of days, and now you come before this committee knowing you're going to be before us, and you've got to slough it off to someone else.
Yeah, and so that was Congressman Pete Sessions making a bunch of excellent points. But wait a second. So we're in the midst of a massive political season. This is a critical presidential election. A lot of attention being paid on it. You have all sorts of Secret Service protectees who are roaming the country, conducting campaign events. Everybody from the Bidens to the Trumps to now the Harrises or Emdorfs or whatever. But the whole point is there's a lot of people the Secret Service have to protect at a very critical time. All sorts of threats out there. And the same idiots are in charge? The guys who almost allowed Trump to be assassinated and did allow an American citizen to be murdered in cold blood at that rally on July 13th? Come on. She should resign immediately. Oh, a long time ago, for that matter. Let me get Dennis in Annapolis in here on line 5. Dennis has been waiting patiently. Dennis, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Vince. Two quick points. One is that I'm surprised nobody at the hearing, none of the House Oversight Committee, brought up a previous incident in which Cheatle was livid about, in which Jake Sullivan's house, he had a home invader undetected with the Secret Service out front.
Yes.
And the guy just walked right in, and fortunately there was no injuries or anything. That's my first point.
Yeah, and I remember it was Jake Sullivan himself, I believe, who ended up seeing this guy. What are you doing in my house?
Right. And she couldn't handle that simple detail. Running that simple detail.
Yes.
And she's competent. And then the second thing is Gerry Connolly pitched her a softball question about, and it was phrased in a kind of a sarcastic manner about, the ubiquity of all the weapons in America that really makes your job less, or that really helps your job and makes your job easier, right? And then, the answer was, she couldn't understand the question, a simple sarcastic question, and the answer should have been, well, that all these guns don't help my job. It don't make my job any easier. But she couldn't figure it out. He tried to rephrase it about 5 times, and he got really frustrated about it, and she couldn't answer it.
Yeah. Well, this is, by the way, is why people
common sense question.
Yeah, this is why people should vote for Mike Van Meter, by the way, against Gerry Connolly in Virginia. Mike would be a much better guy in the role. And here's that exchange that you're referencing. Gerry Connolly tried to make this a big thing about how do we disarm Americans? How do we make Americans less safe, Gerry Connolly asks.
A simple answer. The ubiquity of guns, dangerous weapons in America like AR-15s, has that made your job, that is to say the mission of the Secret Service, easier or more difficult?
I think the threat environment for protecting our Secret Service protectees is always difficult, and that's dynamic, and it's always evolving.
We stipulate it's always difficult. Again, this is a simple one. Does the ubiquity of guns make your job easier or more difficult today?
I understand the Second Amendment rights of individuals.
I didn't ask that question. I'm not questioning the Second Amendment. I'm asking a simple analysis, Director Cheatle. And I can tell you, you're not making my job easier in terms of assessing your qualification for continuing on as director.
The basis to remove her is that she supports the Second Amendment?
You're the head of the Secret Service. You're speaking on behalf of 8,000 members who put their lives on the line. We just had a failure by your own admission. Do guns make your job easier or harder?
I think the job of the Secret Service is difficult on every day, and we need to make sure that we are mitigating all threats, whether that be weapons,
isn't my question.
personnel.
That is not my question. And now I think you're evading the answer, which is not a hard one.
I am sorry that you feel that way, sir.
How else could I feel?
It's just ridiculous. By the way, ask any number of sheriffs across the country if law-abiding armed citizens are a net positive or a net negative. They'll all say it's a net positive. It's good. It's good to have armed citizens who know how to use their guns. It's better. It helps create more secure communities. That is the actual answer, as Kim Cheatle tries to dance away from it. But that's an excellent point, Dennis, as Gerry Connolly tries to turn this into a how do we disarm Americans conversation.
Yep. So common sense question that couldn't be answered.
No, not at all. Thanks,
Vince.
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate the call here. Let us see. I've got Mark in College Park calling in here, line 8. Mark, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Colonnade Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. I think I have a simple solution. Return the Secret Service to just doing counterfeit interdiction and remove all the protection that was afforded to it and give that over to special designated Green Beret forces under the direct supervision of the Office of the President. If that doesn't work, defund entirely now the Secret Service and rebuild it from scratch.
Yeah, find a group that can actually do the job. In other words, because
there's enough former and current Green Beret that they could, in fact, do exactly or actually more than what's going on with this now incompetent. You got to remember this Secret Service was the one that couldn't determine whose cocaine bag was in the White House, went to try to snatch up the documents of Hunter Biden's gun when Biden was not lawful to have Secret Service protection. So there's a lot of reasons why there shouldn't really be any Secret Service except for analysis of counterfeiting.
Yeah, and that's back when they were working for the Treasury Department. Now they're under the Department of Homeland Security. But you're exactly right about the missions there. Yeah, it's wild, and a series of scandals for the Secret Service that have demonstrated that they don't have things quite as stitched up as one would think, based on the movies and the impression of the Secret Service and how locked up they are and how they're able to protect everybody. Unfortunately, any number of events kind of proving Mark's point here. In fact, you remember back to 2014, Obama was in the White House. Obama had just left. He had just boarded Marine One and flown away. And there was a man who jumped the north lawn of the White House. He jumps over the gate, and he runs inside of the White House, evades detection. Nobody knows that he just sprinted across the north lawn. He's running around inside of the White House, and it's a returning Secret Service agent who just saw off the President of the United States, who walks into the building and sees this guy standing there and goes, "What's this guy doing in here?" And they finally caught him inside of the building. Inside of the building. And I remember at the time, if my memory serves correctly, that I guess people had ignored alarms as they were going off as he jumped the fence. Maybe it was a squirrel. Sometimes the squirrels set the alarms off, and no dogs darted across the lawn to stop the guy. The Secret Service has these dogs that are trained to be missiles. I guess all the missiles just were kept at bay. That we didn't unleash them, didn't stop the guy. He runs in the building. I heard recently from a listener who has some knowledge about how all that went down. Apparently, the Obamas had asked for the door alarms to be turned off in the White House because they were annoyed that the alarms kept going off every time somebody would come in and out of the building. So it actually made the place less safe because the Obamas were inconvenienced by the sound of the doors. So they said, oh, shut those off. So they shut them off. And this allowed the guy to get into the building. He's running around. You know what they did after that? They spent ungodly sums of money to heighten the fence outside of the White House to prevent Americans from doing that again, from anybody from doing that again. Rather than like kind of lock in how the Secret Service is supposed to respond. No, they just created more and more barriers, and they charged you a bunch of money in the process. You're welcome. Congratulations. So yeah, what's the evidence that the Secret Service is an elite, locked-in organization? Here we had an assassination attempt. A man was killed, several wounded, to include the former president of the United States and what looks like the future president of the United States. And the Secret Service director says, I'm not resigning. And you even have Democrats. Here's Rasha Krishnamurthy calling for her to resign.
I just don't think this is partisan. If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign. That's what Stuart Knight did. He was a Republican appointee, and he took responsibility.
When Reagan was shot.
And I think you need to reflect. This is not a question of you. It's a question of the American people. You cannot go leading a Secret Service agency when there is an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate.
In fact, Congressman Krishnamurthy also pointed to the footage of what was happening at that rally on July 13th and goes, wait a second, how can you in good conscience explain to us that this guy wasn't detected as a threat very early on?
Director Cheatle, as you know, the shooter began shooting at 6:11 p.m. Eastern on July 13th. NBC reported that at 5:51 p.m., 20 minutes before the shooting began, the state police informed the Secret Service of their concern. Now, the rally was not paused at that point, correct?
No.
No.
And according to NBC, just 2 minutes later, at 5:53 p.m., the Secret Service notified its snipers about the gunman. The rally wasn't paused at that point either, correct?
No.
Let me show you some video footage by rally goers. If you could play the video on the screen up here. This was taken 2 minutes before the shooting started. If you could turn up the volume.
Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
On the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went on the roof again.
Up here. Ma'am, that doesn't look like suspicious behavior. That looks like threatening behavior to me. And the rally wasn't paused at that point either, correct?
I can tell you, as I stated earlier, sir, that the moment that the shift surrounding the president were aware of an actual threat.
That's a threat right there. The guy's on the roof and everybody's yelling at him.
Yes.
And directing the officer's attention to him. The rally was not paused at that point, correct?
We are currently still combing through communications and when communications were passed.
Well, I can point you to this communication. It's 2 minutes before the shots started ringing out. Director Cheatle, yes or no? Was there ever a moment where the Secret Service actually considered pausing the rally?
The Secret Service would have paused the rally had they known or been
So the answer is
there
no.
was an actual threat.
The answer is no. Correct?
I can speak to you in generalities.
No, I don't want generalities. I want
all
specifics.
of the communications.
The answer is no. You did not consider pausing the rally, correct?
The people that are in charge of protecting the president on that day would never bring the former president out if there was a threat that had been identified.
Well, they did, because we've now identified 3 points in the 20 minutes before the shooting that the threat emerged.
That's a Democrat. And that's some of the most coherent questioning we saw all day, which is a shame because more Republicans should sound like that. That was a good line of questioning. It was productive, and it demonstrated that the Secret Service is completely jacked up. The idea that you could have citizens calling out an actual threat to the president, minutes go by, and those shots are still allowed to be taken by the assailant? Something is very dorked up in the Secret Service. All right, hold on. 4:52 now. Mark, Landover Hills, line 2. Mark, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Top of the day to you, Vince. Great show again, buddy.
Thanks, brother.
Hey, man. It's about time that these people who are put in these positions, like this lady, are held in account, and they need to be told over and over again, I guess like a little child, that, man, they are public servants, and they have an obligation to the public to give information when asked and not be evasive and not be dysfunctional. Vince, we need to figure out how we can hold these people to account, because if we don't, we are all stuck in this doldrum effect that they have of none of us having any standing, and this is all interrelated to take our rights away from us, buddy.
It all starts at the top, too, doesn't it, Mark? It's all at the very top. You can't have accountability lower in the federal government if you don't have it at the top, which is why Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or whoever the hell they put up this year needs to be replaced, and we need to restore some order and some accountability. Hold on. Coming up, Sean Davis will weigh in on all of the big stories this week, from the Secret Service's failures to the left's coup against Joe Biden. It's ahead.